Welcome to the Lone Star Keto Podcast. I'm your host, Amber. My vision for this podcast is to showcase experts in the keto carnivore community, as well as those who have compelling stories that inspire and give others hope. My wish is that no one has to suffer like I did. If you find value in this podcast, please consider subscribing and hitting that notification button. And as always, feel free to share. Thank you so much for your support. Hi, I'm Amber, and welcome to the Lone Star Keto Podcast. Today we have a special guest with us, Rebekah Farmer. She is a health and life coach who has had the most extraordinary health journey. I have never heard anything like this, and I'm so excited to be able to talk to her about it. Welcome, Rebekah.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here, Amber.
I'm excited to have you. I just find your story like incredibly inspirational and hopeful to other people who may have some of the issues you had. So I'd like to start off with you talking about your health background and getting into the nitty gritty. I want people to know what you went through, and so we can get to where you are now. So go for it. Just tell us everything. I don't care how long it takes. Say everything.
All right. So started in 6th grade. I was diagnosed with osteoporosis, which is a very young age to be diagnosed with that. And in 7th grade, I was suffering from severe mood disorders. This was right after my family had picked up and moved to a totally new state. You know, I left my childhood roots, all my friends in 6th grade. It's a really hard time. Not to mention, I started my period the day that we drove the truck and moved. It was horrible. So I was living in a hotel. I was, trying new schools. I had no sense of consistency or control. And I do think that trauma has to do with what I've been through. So anyway, 7th grade, I was diagnosed with OCD, anxiety, insomnia, narcolepsy, depression, and I think I said ADHD. And I was put on Adderall, clonazepam, and Ambien. And at that time, they said, these are not addictive. You can take these long-term and you're good. And benzodiazepines you should not be taking for more than 30 days. So just the fact that they told me that, it blows my mind. I was continuously getting sick. I was always getting sick growing up. I had asthma even before the osteoporosis, very young age, and diagnosed with failure to thrive more than once by multiple different doctors that were not in communication with each other. And that was a really kind of scary diagnosis to get when you're young. It's like failure to thrive. That indicates nothing good. And they had nothing for that. So I would just get sick a lot. And of course they would give me antibiotics, and that was the answer to everything until 7th grade. And they said, okay, get on these prescriptions. So I took those for 13 years, and I continued to get worse. My weight started to drop eventually because of the Adderall. And right at the end of high school, I was rushed to the emergency room because I felt like I was having a heart attack. And so they diagnosed me with costochondritis, which is inflammation of the chest tissue, and degenerative disc, and anxiety. They had to pump me full of morphine and send me home and just say, continue to take your benzodiazepines. They prescribed me opioids and pain meds. And they said, yeah, you can take these too. And I tried them and I felt like a zombie. So I didn't take them, thank goodness. And so I kept running into more chronic pain and digestive issues. I had digestive issues for most of my life, and I didn't talk about it because I thought it was normal. I didn't feel comfortable just talking about my poop, and that I felt sick and uncomfortable whenever I ate. I thought it was just a normal thing that people go through. And so I eventually saw some gastroenterologists, and they diagnosed me with diverticulitis, slow transit colon, IBS, IBD, and true celiac. So it was kind of a relief when I got these diagnoses. It's like, okay, maybe I'll have some relief and, not be in pain when I eat. But they didn't have any solution for me. They told me to eat, I don't remember exactly what they told me to eat at that time, but later on they told me to eat rice cakes and popcorn and things that made no sense whatsoever. Not to mention there was no protein mentioned. So I was very blessed to grow up with a relative who, I won't mention her name, but she is very versed in the ketogenic diet, and she taught me a lot about it. So I was doing keto from a young age, which is awesome. My mom never gave us high sugar foods. She never let us drink pop. I mean, I was lucky if I got chocolate chips in my peanut butter sandwich, which is great. So I would say I was paleo, and then I was keto for over 15 years, truly. So when I started getting all these issues, well, actually, I'll back up. After the chronic pain, I continued to do keto, stayed on my meds. I tried to get off of them multiple times, but I kept going back on them because I was going through stuff. I went through, I got engaged, and he cheated on me in our apartment, and I was young. And I didn't have a drive. I didn't know what my calling was. I just felt like I was floating through life. And so I kept taking the meds because it was like, at least I can function. I was like a zombie, and they stole a lot of my personality. And I didn't know who I was in Christ. I didn't know my potential. And I had a lot of heartbreak, a lot of anxiety. All those mood disorders were real. I had OCD to the point where I wanted to tear out of my own skin. It just enslaved me, and thoughts would just run through my mind over and over on repeat, or like lines in songs. It was like I couldn't even hear my own thoughts. So I kept taking the meds because it was like, I have to function, and this is the only solution. So after high school, I started real estate. I got engaged again, and I was planning a wedding, working full time, and I went through wisdom tooth removal surgery, and they put me on antibiotics and pain meds afterwards. So I took those, and I believe that was the last straw of my gut, because right after that, my central nervous system, it burnt out. I mean, I was bedbound with crippling suffocation and anxiety attacks on a regular basis. I was losing my mind. I was rushed to the emergency room over and over. I would call my parents to come over and massage me. I felt like I couldn't breathe. And I drove away my fiance. I mean, he had his issues for sure, but I was a monster, and I pushed him away, and I secretly wanted him to fight for me, but I was scared. I was terrified of what was going on. I had no idea. I had no control. And I just wanted to know, like, are you going to stay with me through all this? Because I'm losing my mind. And, he didn't, for a good reason. I was a monster. And it wouldn't have worked out. We would have been just very unhappy. There was total chaos. So I moved back in with my parents for a second time. And I was sleeping with my mom in my parents' bed. I couldn't be alone. And I was trying to wean off of the medications. So at this time, I reached out to my relative who knows a lot about keto, and I said, I need help. So she helped me with a more strict version of the ketogenic diet. I really, buckled down. I was like, okay, I'm going to actually look at macros and pay attention to this stuff. And that did start to help. And I started working with functional medicine doctors as well. It's like, these other doctors have nothing for me, and they're just going to tell me that I'm crazy for not taking my meds. So that's when I uncovered a plethora of autoimmune issues: Hashimotos, Addison's disease, fibromyalgia, Raynaud's, and shortly after, chronic Lyme disease and central sensitization syndrome. And honestly, I was relieved. Just to have a diagnosis and to know that I wasn't a crazy person. And I felt like I had hope because, at least they were telling me that there's a reason I was feeling this way. One of the the rheumatologists that diagnosed me with central sensitization syndrome, they said that people like me could not be put in a box and labeled. And that meant so, so much to me because that's all I had ever been. And they said, continue with your holistic healing. You know, at least it's giving you some hope. They already knew I wasn't going to take any meds. And they said, good luck. So I just continued to work with these doctors, looked into the Lyme disease clinics. Those treatments were beyond what I could ever afford. And I did not have peace about it. I didn't have peace about, you know, they diagnosed me, but then they were like, okay, so here's your treatment. It's thousands of dollars each week. That's not sustainable. So I walked away and I just decided God is going to provide, but this isn't possible. My family can't pay for it. They're not going to. I can't pay for it. And it was unsettling. You know, I did the IV treatments a couple of times, just like 2 or 3 times. And when I did that, I spoke with some of the other patients and they were just, it really turned me off how they were identifying with this disease. Mm-hmm. And they were defeated. And they had already accepted that the rest of their lives were going to be like this. They felt they were too comfortable. And that really, that's what turned me off. And that's why I said, see ya. I'm not going to live that way. I'd rather be crazy. And I'm not, you know, not to say that they aren't helpful for many people, but that was my experience. I also received ozone therapy in New York City for an entire month. Someone hooked me up and I didn't feel anything. I got PRP in that same trip. Someone hooked me up. I've been really blessed with connections. And these are things that are supposed to help significantly. And they didn't make any difference. Not that I'm ungrateful for them, but it was like, this is not the answer. So as I did the stricter version of the ketogenic diet, I did experience some relief with the chronic fatigue that I had. I was able to get out of bed and I felt a little less crazy. I stopped having the seizures that I was having. I mean, I couldn't drive. I would try to drive and I would pull over on the side of the road when I felt like I was going to have a seizure, which is very dangerous. So I don't think anyone should do that. So yeah, I started to experience relief. And at that time, I actually reversed the Hashimotos and Addison's disease. This was before carnivore. And the thing that I remember doing the most was ramping up my calories like crazy because I recognized the fact that I was underweight. I wasn't severely underweight yet, but I was underweight. And I knew that fat fueled our hormones. And I knew that my body was already in a place of fight or flight. So I slammed down the calories and I started taking iodine and selenium. And shortly after, I retested for Addison's and Hashimoto's and they were gone. But I continued to get very sick. And so I continued what I was doing. I thought that the keto diet was the answer. You know, I thought it was like God's gift to me and I was going to do this forever. And eventually it would heal everything, especially with the hope of Hashimoto's and Addison's going away. It's like, okay, this is a sign. This is what I'm doing is right. But I started to lose significant amounts of weight. And this went on for over a year before one of my doctors finally tested me for C-diff. Came back positive, and I was relieved because I've been misdiagnosed with an eating disorder more times than I can count even by a neurologist that recommended the ketogenic diet for people. They said, you have an eating disorder. You don't need to be doing keto. And I was like, well, I'm having seizures, you know? So I continued to lose weight. I took 13 rounds of antibiotics for the C. diff. I was resistant to all of them. I had to take each one like 3 times, resistant to all of them. And at that point, I was approved to have a fecal transplant. And it came back negative. It didn't work. the first time. So I was approved for another, and it came back negative the second time. So it had actually taken care of the C. diff. And that was fantastic. And that was like 2 months of total hope. Like, okay, I'm going to conquer this. I'm going to make it out. And then 2 months later, I could tell, I think the day that it took over again, I felt like a different person. And so I told my doctor, I think we need to retest. And sure enough, it had taken back over. So I had a third fecal transplant, and it was still there. And that's when they told me it has seeded in your gut, and you might consider doing at-home transplants for the rest of your life. And that was pretty much it. So at this time, this is May of last year. I had just moved from North Carolina to Illinois because I met someone on eHarmony. I was very transparent about everything in my profile. I was like, I've got autoimmune issues. I believe that God is going to bring me through this. I am, you could see that I was very thin. And so I thought, I didn't have any ties at home because my family believed that I had an eating disorder. It was very toxic and very painful. And they actually forced me to stay in a hospital for an entire month to be treated for an eating disorder. And that wrecked. I mean, when I came out of there, I had the keto rash for the first time, which I think is a lot of oxalate dumping. My labs were so much worse when I got out of there. I mean, I already had chronic Epstein Barr and all these crazy things, but that was a nightmare to see my labs after that. So that's why I decided I don't have any ties. I'm going to move to Illinois with this guy who, is a Christian. He seems like a good fit. I met him once and I picked up everything I had and I came here, and turns out he was a narcissist, and he didn't know how to love others. And I still pray for him to this day. It was a very, very bad situation. So I had gotten myself into domestic abuse, and I was already so sick, and it was a horrible, scary time. And I didn't know how to gain weight. I was involuntarily throwing up. I had developed ulcerative colitis due to the C. diff. And I developed a binge eating disorder because the sight of my emaciated body was so triggering. It was just like, I have to eat to save my life. So I tried to do it very methodically. I would spend my entire afternoon preparing keto foods and setting up, the living room with plenty of water, because it was just, I was in pain every time I ate. So I had to make it this big thing. And that was really bad. And there was a bit of just self-sabotage in that, because sometimes it was like I would stay up until the wee hours of the morning or even through the next day. And I knew that I would be like in a coma. And that was like the only relief that I had from this nightmare that I was in. But even still, I knew that God was with me. My faith is one thing that has never stopped. I can't deny God's existence in my life. But I felt very, very alone. So I contacted women's shelters, almost ended up in a women's shelter. But I had gotten so sick to the point where I was like, I need to get myself away from this person, and I need to fix myself, because I wasn't even thinking clearly. So I checked myself into an emergency room at a time that I could tell my electrolytes were off, and sure enough, they were off all the time. And I ended up in 3 emergency rooms back to back. And at this point, I was asking them, treat me with an eating disorder. Put me in this program and refeed my body, because I can't do it on my own. I was terrified. And they couldn't do it because I had the C. diff infection and I have to be held in isolation. So they're just holding me in isolation in the ER and, sending up the trays of carbohydrates and crap food. And finally, I reached out to the dietitian in there privately. I said, you've got to let me try this all meat diet. I've heard about it. I've tried it before, but I've never been able to stick with it. And I just knew in the back of my head that I had to give it a shot, and she agreed. And so she got me in touch with the chef in the kitchen, and they were sending up multiple entrees of meat, eggs, and butter to my room throughout the day. I was throwing away the crap that they were sending up, and I had to fill out this slip and say, yes, I ate it. But I was just throwing it away and hiding it in the trash can. And I was hoarding these foods in my room. And I got away with it because I was being held in isolation. So after a week of that, I gained 4 pounds. And not to mention, within like 2 days, my blood sugars were so stable. No more glucagon shots, no more hypoglycemia. I mean, I still have the post in my Instagram of this occurrence. I remember it like it was today. I was talking with multiple people through Instagram. They were encouraging me, but no one really had like specific advice. So I just went all in, and I was like, I'm going to do this carnivore diet and do it my way this time, because I had tried it 8 times before. I tried just beef, salt, and water, and I failed each time. It was too restrictive, and I felt worse. So this was the first time that I had looked at it with a new pair of eyes. It's like, I need to make this sustainable for me, and I need to gear it towards my own bio-individual needs. So after, that success in the emergency room, the dietitian told the doctor, and the doctor said, go home and do your weird all meat diet. And that's what I did. I went back. I was a much more resilient person. Like, the light bulb went off. My mood and energy picked up within 2 weeks. But even just coming back home, I had so much more confidence to face what I was facing there. And I was like, no, you can't talk to me that way. And I'm going to get out of this. I didn't know how, but I had a new confidence. My brain was already working much better. It was so encouraging, not involuntarily throwing up whenever I ate. It was like, okay, have some stability and control now. So I just ran with it, and I made it my own. I was making hyper palatable foods on purpose so that I could eat at a surplus. Like, I couldn't eat steak for the first 5 months. It was way too filling. So I was doing, and I was just intuitive with it. I was making meat broth with pig ears and chicken feet. And I was air frying fish skins, which are really amazing. And they're free too. And lots of lamb, beef. And I put away my glucose monitor for some time, because I knew that my blood sugar was going to be a little bit higher because of the protein. I mean, there was a time in my life where I couldn't tolerate more than 30 grams of protein per day. And my blood sugar would, be in the 130 or something. Crazy. So I put it away, because it's like, I have to do this. I have to gain weight. That was my priority. And everything else just came together. I found someone very, very, very kind, allowed me to live with them in their Airbnb with 6 bedrooms and 1 bathroom for free while I was healing. And they encouraged me. And eventually I got out of there into my own place. And I already knew that I wanted to be a health coach in 2017. But that right after I decided that, I was diagnosed with Lyme disease, and I was prohibited to work due to my medical instability. I was in real estate, and my doctor said, you cannot work anymore. And so I had to put it on the back burner. And so as I started to heal, it's like, okay, I'm ready. And I've just improved. I've progressively healed since then. I checked in with my rheumatologist here probably once a month when I got back from that hospital, that emergency room, and all of the autoimmune markers just started dropping off like flies. It was crazy. I thought that it was fake. He calls it a miracle. All of my doctors here say it's a miracle. They were the ones that did the last fecal transplant, and it's a miracle. My labs are textbook perfect. I am thriving more than I ever have in my life. I don't just mean my body and how I feel. I mean my heart. My mind works, but it's my heart. Like, I am free. I'm free from this bondage that I've had my entire life. And it held me back. And I felt like I didn't feel like he was punishing me, but I felt like I was someone who, that was just a person who just was going to suffer forever. And I just kind of accepted that. And it didn't feel good. And now I am able to help other people who also know what it's like to feel hopeless and to be told this is a chronic diagnosis. It's irreversible. I was told that I was going to die, or that I probably wouldn't live past 30 years old because of the crest scleroderma that I developed, and it was rapidly taking over my body. It was taking over my lungs, and this can wrap itself around your internal organs and kill you. So yeah, I'm still on cloud 9, and I don't know if I'll ever come back down. This is something like, this is like It's a Wonderful Life. You just kind of turn into this person like nothing can touch me. I wake up with a smile on my face. I sleep so well. I feel excellent. I've gained 65 healthy pounds. I lift really heavy. I mean, I used to not be able to hold my own head up, and now I am hip thrusting 190 pounds in just, a little over 1 year. So I am here to share my testimony and share what God did in my life. I truly believe that when we remove the interference and remain open-minded and have faith, our bodies will heal themselves. It's so true. And I will also say that affirmations have helped me a lot. They helped me continue to believe, speaking truth and healing over my life instead of sickness and fear. When our bodies hear something out loud enough times, that it starts to obey. It actually creates physiological changes. And this applies to anyone. You don't have to have the same faith that I do. This is science. So, just being mindful of my words and my thinking patterns, and started taking cold showers and all this stuff. It does help, but I'm just, like I said, I'm still on cloud 9, and I'm just so grateful, and I'm helping other people, and I get to witness these miracles that happen in other people. Mm-hmm. And I have the experience now to help people troubleshoot and identify what works best for them. Carnivore is so powerful because it removes the anti-nutrients, and it is providing the most bioavailable nutrients possible. In that hospital, they said, you need to be hooked up to a feeding tube. We have to remove your colon. And all I needed was meat, and to remove all of the other stuff. So anyways, sorry.
That is, no, that's amazing. And I hate, but I love your story at the same time, because you lived through complete, utter hell, and you've come out, and you're this radiant, beautiful person who has so much life and so much to give to other people. That is amazing. But I do believe that because of our struggles, it makes us who we are. And yes. And I didn't have anywhere near the background you have, not even close. But I know how that shaped who I am today and why I do what I do, because I don't want anybody else to have to suffer as long as I did before before you figure it out, right?
Yeah.
And your story, to me, when I first heard it, I was like, you couldn't even make this up and make a Hollywood movie out of this, because it's too far-fetched. It is not believable, because it is so much. No single person could possibly go through that. It's like, when somebody has something happen, and then you're like, oh, that's terrible. Then something else, and you're like, oh, that's really bad. And then over and over until you finally get to the point where you're like, oh, come on.
Oh,
really?
That's where it came to. I mean, not to interrupt you, but I was seeing chiropractors for a long time. And one of the chiropractors, their stem unit, one of the pads was broken. So I ended up with open gaping wounds on my back. I didn't make the connection, and they were electrical burns. And so I had bleeding wounds this big all over. I have scars still.
Oh my God.
But my doctor at the time, she thought it was an autoimmune thing. She's like, we have to biopsy these and send them to go to a dermatologist. But at that point, I was like, and not even phased. I was like, okay, nothing surprised me. I started to become like numb.
I can
It was
imagine.
totally like that.
Yeah. I mean, how could you not? I mean, seriously, you've been through what, 100 people, if they all had one thing, good gosh. So I am so inspired by you. I think it's just so amazing what you've been through. Now, there's something I want to back up and talk about. And I heard you talk about this somewhere else, and you kind of just kind of barely mentioned it in a way.
Mm-hmm.
You were diagnosed with an eating disorder before you had an eating disorder. I want to know how that happened, why that happened, and what you were going through when you were living with your parents. And because I understand your parents kind of forced that upon you.
Right. Yeah. So
I want to talk about that.
I mean, there was a point where I was thinner than 69 pounds. And it was when I was taking the Adderall, and I had a really bad breakup at the end of high school. Rumors were spread about me. Anonymous people were harassing me online, calling me a Holocaust whore. And I lost most of my friends because of these nasty rumors. And he came back around and apologized 5 years later.
Wow.
But that was really painful. And I did stop eating, but I was not trying to lose weight. I was just numb. I was in so much pain. And that was when my family started saying, you have an eating disorder. And I would say they were accurate, but I was not trying to starve myself. I didn't even look in the mirror. I was seriously in pain. I was staying up for five days at a time. I was totally wired on these meds. And I mean, I was dealing with mania, and I was angry at my family for accusing me of that, because it was like, can you not see that I'm in so much pain? It has nothing to do with my appearance. I couldn't eat. I was heartbroken. And that is what started the eating disorder accusation. I gained weight after that. I healed my heart. I started gaining weight again. And when I started losing weight again because of the C-diff, I was checked into a hospital, and at the emergency room, when they asked, are you having any thoughts of hurting yourself? I said, well, yes and no, because I have autoimmune disease, and essentially my body is harming itself. And they took that the wrong way, and I was sent to the psych ward. I was stuck in a rubber room for hours. Then they sent me to the trauma unit. Then they sent me to the crisis unit. And when they were holding me there, I told one of the nurses very openly that I was doing the ketogenic diet for my autoimmune disease. It was the only thing that had, alleviated being bedbound. And she took that and ran with it. So she held me there for days. And while she was petitioning with other doctors to have me sent to the eating disorder unit. So that was very, very deceptive. And I didn't even know that they could do that in a hospital. And she snuck behind my back. She talked to my mom. I remember right after she told my mom, because I walked up to my mom and she wasn't talking to me. She looked like a ghost. And she finally told me, she's like, the nurse just told me that your stomach is too small and that you cannot refeed properly. And so they forced me to go to the eating disorder unit. They told my mom that that she couldn't trust anything I said, and that I was going to die otherwise. So that's why my parents held me there.
Wow.
They didn't want me to die. And I'm writing a book about this experience. I was calling my mom nonstop. I was calling my doctor. She wouldn't pick up her phone. I just felt so alone and abandoned and misunderstood, scared. And I was telling them, the dietitian in the eating disorder unit, I was like, I've got to do keto. And she sympathized with me. She's like, I believe that you have autoimmune issues, but in this unit, you are in an acute setting. Our only goal is to keep you alive. They tested my blood sugar 8 times a day. They fed us 6 times a day. It was 75% carbohydrates. I was starving for fat. The only fat they had was butter. I was lucky if it was real butter, and peanut butter. And I was eating fruit, I think 4 to 6 times a day. I had so many apples. I had an apple cutter on me all the time to slice all my apples. And I was just in so much pain, with the fibromyalgia and all of the autoimmune issues. I was in constant inflammation. They put me back on my sleep meds in the hospital. I didn't go to the restroom once. I did not poop once in an entire month until they gave me a bottle of magnesium citrate. And when I asked them, what do you expect me to do? Do you really expect me to go home and keep eating this way and not poop? And they were like, it'll work itself out eventually. So refeeding truly is a complicated process, but if they would handle it differently and prioritize protein and take away the thing that is stimulating insulin, it would just solve this picture. And I experienced that when I did carnivore. The refeeding process was so much better, so much easier. Not to mention I didn't deal with mania. And I was okay with the weight gain. The first, when I gained weight in that hospital, I will openly admit it felt very uncomfortable. I was bloated beyond belief. I was so uncomfortable in my body. The mirrors were all blurred out. You couldn't see anything. There were people in wheelchairs. I didn't even understand. I was like, why is there a chair in the shower? And I realized I'm with all these people who are so malnourished and emaciated that, we're near death. People were being flown in by helicopter. And that really, it woke me up and I was scared.
Wow.
So when I came back home, I was required to work with eating disorder therapists. I was lucky that I didn't end up in like a step down program or a residential treatment. I actually checked myself out against medical advice after 1 month. And my parents were saying, in the beginning, they were saying, if you check yourself out, you'll be homeless. You won't have anywhere to live. So I stayed for a month. I put on 15 pounds. And that's when I said, I cannot do this any longer. And they allowed me to come back if I agreed to work with eating disorder therapists and dietitians. So it was a nightmare living at home after that. My mom was watching me like a hawk every time I was in the kitchen. I ended up eating in the dining room where no one was, just so they couldn't watch me. And you better bet I went right back to keto. And I told my dietitian, I said, I need to do this if I'm going to, be able to function at all. And so she allowed me, and she just held me accountable. Are you eating enough? And I was eating more than enough. And at one point I was eating 6,000 calories and still losing weight. But even still, I was being misdiagnosed with an eating disorder. So it just went on forever. And the binge eating, it was kind of like a slap in the face. It was like, now I actually have an eating disorder because I've been so traumatized by all of this. And it took over my life. I got in the worst car accident of my life. I was totally numb, just binging during a binge episode. And it took over, and I am completely healed of that. I do not struggle with binging at all, but I have experienced it to the point where it took over. Like, it's like I was possessed. So yeah.
Do you harbor any resentment towards your parents at all? Or what did you feel like when you were going through it? Were you angry with them, or did you just?
Yeah, I was very angry. And some people helped me get into an apartment because I couldn't live there. The dynamic was so toxic. I won't get into the details, but it was bad arguments all the time. My mom was hiding in her bedroom pretty much all day because we couldn't be around one another. Wow. We were so misunderstood. And they wanted me to see a family therapist with them. And of course she specialized in eating disorders, and I felt like they were all plotting against me. And I fired her. And I was like, I can't work with you, because all she wanted to talk about was eating disorders. And I was happy to do family counseling with my parents. I wanted to restore this relationship. But what I had to say is not what she wanted to hear. What I had to say was, I have autoimmune disease and I need someone to help me and believe me, and
Yeah.
she wouldn't have that. She wanted to, I don't know if they get kickbacks or payoffs if they check someone into a eating disorder treatment, but that's what I felt like. So I got away from that. And so eventually I moved out because the pressure was too much. It was like, if you're under this roof, you have to do this, this, and this, and that. And I couldn't heal doing that. And so when I moved out, we just didn't talk. And when I moved away, they did help me pack up on that moving day. And I didn't know if I would ever see them again. I mean, I was so emaciated and sick, and it was very hard because I was leaving my niece, and I didn't want the last time she saw me was this weak, emaciated person. So that became a huge why for me, to get strong and to not give up. Is I want my niece to see that women are strong and they can overcome whatever they want. And if someone's going to say this and that about me, I know my truth. And staying true to yourself through all of that, eventually it's going to shine through. And so I saw my mom for the first time since I got healthy again last summer, and she was just in tears. We spent a couple days at the beach together, and it was so awesome. I mean, our relationship has never been so good. Same with my dad and my sister. So no, I don't have any resentment. If I were a parent, I probably would have done the same thing. They were afraid for my life. Mm-hmm. And there was a point in my life where I didn't eat around them on purpose, begrudgingly, because they didn't recognize that I was in so much emotional pain. I held a grudge for them moving from Michigan, during my childhood, pulling me away from my friends. I was angry. Emotional, and I didn't have any problem not eating. I didn't have an appetite. So I didn't give in to their pressure. Like, I remember a trip we took to Michigan, and we all stopped for food, and I just wasn't hungry. And I got some roasted almonds. And my mom was like, you're doing that eating disorder thing again. And that made me so angry. And so for the rest of that trip, I didn't eat around them. And I waited until I was visiting with my friends. And sure enough, I had a giant burrito in Ann Arbor, and it was awesome. But that's, I was just angry, and I didn't like that they were already looking at me and judging me. And so I didn't want to give them satisfaction of being like, okay, well, I'll eat around you because you're encouraging me. Like, no, I was so angry. I was misunderstood. So yeah, I understand where they were coming from. I do.
Yeah. And being a parent, I can understand that too. But being that I myself actually have had an eating disorder, and, I would be very resentful of that, and, angry. And I remember feeling very watched when it was discovered. And so I can understand on a very small level of what you've gone through. And that is really tough, though. I just couldn't even imagine being, forced to go through something when that really wasn't the diagnosis. That really wasn't what your issue was. Well, not until later.
Especially in the hospital when we had like cognitive behavioral therapy, and we had these sessions. I mean, it was a really good structure for people who really needed it. But they told us that, if you're sensitive to gluten, it's all in your head. And what they taught us in there, it messed with my head, and it was very traumatizing. So when I started binging, I tried to convince myself that it was all in my head. I wanted that to be the answer because I desperately wanted to gain weight. I was like, what if I just give in and I say what if it is an eating disorder? I had already searched my heart in the hospital. I knew it wasn't, but I was so desperate that I wanted it to be an eating disorder, because it would have been very simple if it were. So I tried to convince myself that it was all in my head, and I got Panera and, all the baguettes and gluten. And I just, put myself in a coma. I hurt myself. And I, that it didn't get that bad for a long time because it was undeniable. I couldn't make it work. So yeah, it really messed with my head major. And I feel bad for many of the people that come out of that treatment and still struggle. I made a lot of really good friends in there, but what we're taught is go home and keep eating these carbohydrates and these things that make you crazy.
Yes.
And dealing with hypoglycemia and blood sugar issues, like no wonder we're suffering.
And you're mental, because when your hormones are all wackadoodle, it makes it hard for you to be able to function and do things, with a clear head. That's crazy. I've heard a lot of really bad things about some of these, units or whatever you want to call them, clinics, whatever, dealing with eating disorders, and horrifying what they're taught. Scary. I'm not saying there's not good ones. I'm not saying people don't benefit with it for some degree, but some of the horror stories I've heard, I'm like, oh, thank gosh, I never had to actually go into one, because that's scary. I was messed up enough. What in the world would that have done to me? Where would I be right now? I mean,
some of these, my roommate, she had been in 11 different treatments. She was a little older than me, and thank God I don't think she ever went back after we roomed together, and we're still in touch. Wow. She'll be in my book under a different name. But another girl I made really good friends with, she was getting shock therapy. And they just treated us like we were crazy, and there was nothing wrong with these hyper processed foods. And, I get the intention, but it's not that simple. And it's a crime to say that it is. It's a crime to call someone crazy for recognizing something that's true. And it was, they didn't even allow me to stand. I was, with the fibromyalgia, it's hard for me to stand still and sit still for a long period of time. I'm always like, okay, I need to stretch or something. So I was really suffering from that. And they didn't allow me to stand. Like, I had to be sitting. It was considered exercise. I couldn't stretch while I was sitting. It was considered exercise. And that just, I talked to the doctor every morning. We sat with the doctor in a room, and I told her, like, I'm in pain. I need a chiropractor. I need to be able to move and stretch. And she had no sympathy at all. She was like, well, I mean, it was just meds. It was just giving us meds. It's crazy.
Yeah, that I find that so scary. And like I said, some of the stories I've heard too are just horrifying. And that sets you up for so much damage later on that it's not even funny. And I know, they try to help, but that's just like, with the food guidelines. Okay, of course, I don't really think those were put in place to help anybody. I think it was more to make money for certain people kind of thing, but whatever. But the damage, I can't even imagine. I mean, some of these people coming out and, thank goodness you did not have a complete defeatist attitude, that you decided to stand up and fight back and say, no, this isn't going to happen. Now, I know faith played a very huge part in that. Talk just a little bit about that.
It held, when I was in that hospital, and my entire family was against me. My doctor wasn't picking up her phone. I messaged, when I got computer rights, I messaged my friends and they weren't there for me. I had 2 friends visit me while I was there, but they thought that I had an eating disorder too. I finally stopped fighting. I stopped calling my mom, and I realized, okay, God, you're all I have. And that's when I realized for the first time in my life that there is no human on this earth that won't let you down. And that's when I realized God won't let me down. So my mom got me a Bible journal. I had like a devotional and a section to journal, and I started using that. I stopped calling her, but I started using that, and I still have that journal. And it was just a prayer every morning. God, please give me wisdom with the doctor. Help her to believe me. If you get me out of here, I promise, I'll never hold it against my parents. And I gave it all to him. I said, you're in control, because I was scared that I was going to die. And I needed that fear. And that's when I drew really close to God, and it became very intimate. And I realized that he knew my heart. And it didn't matter what anyone said about me. As long as I was being true to myself, that's all that mattered. I wasn't living a lie. I wasn't lying. I was being true to myself. And as I was doing that, I realized, okay, God, I wanted to be sure that God could work in my life. I didn't want to do anything that would hold back his healing. And he had a purpose for me to go through that. Now I can talk about it. And I met lifelong friends in there. I really did. And I learned a lot about myself with conversations. I was still dealing with body dysmorphia. I would talk to my roommate, and we would exercise in the room when the nurses were always patrolling, but we would pace back and forth, and I would do yoga and she would do squats, and we would talk about our butts. Are they growing? And it was just like, when I let it go and I gave it to God, I was able to take away a lot. And I stopped complaining. I stopped fighting it. And I just realized I can be an example for these people. And the girl that I mentioned in shock treatment, I made really good friends with her. And she wasn't talking to anyone, I noticed. And so I ended up becoming really good friends with her, and we would play cards, and we are still really, really good buddies. And so there's a purpose for what we all go through. And it was that time that I realized, okay, I just have to trust God. He's sovereign. I don't deserve this, but it's not about me. Life is not about me. And that's why I have joy now. It's like, there's a bigger picture. We're here for each other. And that was exciting. It was exciting.
That's beautiful. I love that. Thank you for saying that. And, I feel that in a lot of ways too. And gosh, you have to look at it that way, because why in the world would you have gone through all this stuff in your life if it wasn't to have some meaning? And some, right. Hello, the movie Signs, right? There's a reason for everything that happened. So I totally believe that. I've always believed that. But, now that I look back in what I'm doing now, it's like, okay, that was a horrible time in my life. A lot of bad crap, a lot of bad health, but it's got me to where I am today. And if I wouldn't have gone through that, I would not have the empathy I have now. I wouldn't have the insight. So you have this plethora of experience and knowledge now, and to help so many people. So let's talk a little bit about that. I want to know your journey to becoming the health and life coach that you are now. When did you start that exactly? What have you gone through to get to that point?
Yeah. So in 2017, I was like, okay, I'm ready. I know my stuff. I knew keto. I had worked with my relative who she ran transformation programs. I knew keto. I knew supplements. I knew, I had reversed Hashimotos. It's like, I've got this. But then I had to put it on the back burner. I was too sick. So when I got into that Airbnb that I mentioned, I realized, okay, eventually I'm going to have to pay to keep a roof over my head. And that's when I looked into health coaching certifications, and I took out a personal loan so that I could pay it all off right away and get like a discount that they had. And I did like a fast tracked program. It took 6 months. And thankfully I knew everything they were teaching me. But what I did learn was the life coaching aspect, and learning how to ask the right questions with people and navigating those things. And that has been awesome, because behavior is just as important as nutrition. Nutrition is a great foundation, but if your behavior is not aligned for health and healing, then you could just hold yourself back forever. So I became certified, and I've been working with people since, and it's just been incredible, really incredible. And like you said, I realize for everything that I've gone through, I've been able to help someone because of it. I have people reach out to me who are also totally misunderstood by people closest to them, who are trying to gain weight. And I have people say, you know, how did you like not hold it against your family? How do you not hate them? And that breaks my heart. And I am able to help them understand, you know, God has grace with you. God had grace with me. I've done horrible things. And it's not about us. It's not about me. So anyways, yeah.
Yeah, I love that aspect, you know, being able to help somebody else. I think that is so important, you know, just as a human being, you know, just knowing that somebody could benefit from some of your pain, so that they don't have to go through it. Yeah, it really is. And you're absolutely right. It's not just the physical. It's not just the diet. It's not, or the exercise. It is the mental, it's the emotional, it's the psychological. It's just so much stuff going on. And that's what I deal with more often than food.
Right?
It's like, you know, that is not that difficult. The food part really honestly isn't. It's just trying to, you know, get everything in sync. And then you also have, you know, your sleep and your, you know, stress level and stuff like that. There's so much to it.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad that you have this ability to do that and to share, you know, all your knowledge. That's amazing. Let me look at the time. Ooh, okay, let me see if there's anything that okay, just real quick, you talked about how you felt that some of the trauma you went through triggered some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Like you know, your parents move, bad relationships, those kind of things. Explain a little bit more about that, because I think a lot of people who struggle with diet and health and etc. have had a lot of trauma in their life. And one person that talks out about this a whole lot is Jimmy Moore, and what he went through. And he's really brought the whole trauma and eating health, you know, together, which that's something you don't really think about so much. I mean, yeah, the mental part, sure, but you don't really think about it affecting your health.
Mm-hmm.
Talk a little bit about that.
I mean, what we go through affects us. I am working with a client right now who she recently went through a lot of excitement, really good excitement in her life, like getting married during COVID. And, you know, they're all good things, but she was really busy and it was still a lot of stress. And she's now realizing, okay, I mean, she's dealing with some digestive issues. And I think it's due to her central nervous system being wound up for an extended period of time. And sure enough, she is, you know, she's making changes and making improvements. So it's not always bad stuff that happens to us. It's just our bodies are sensitive to our environments. You know, like when I was living at home with my parents, that toxic environment, I was constantly in fight or flight. My blood sugars were super high just because of the environment. So think of what trauma does. When we go through something, sometimes trauma sticks with us after the fact. That's the point. It's traumatizing. Sometimes we have to relive it to heal from it. Getting off of benzodiazepines was traumatizing, really, like hard. And I had to relive it over and over again. And it's like I had a second wind of withdrawals where I felt like I was losing my mind. So, you know, what we go through, it affects us at a physiological level. And I had to go through that trauma that I lived to heal from it. And it definitely, it's like doing it all over again, you know, dealing with it, emotionally processing can still make me very tense. Even, you know, writing my book right now, it's traumatizing. I have to take breaks. Like I will have nightmares and I will dream that my family hates me again. And I'll call my mom crying the next morning. I'm like, I'm so glad, you know, to be awake and things are good.
So is the
And
book, you writing this and going through this all over again, is this kind of cathartic for you? I mean, I know it's kind of traumatizing, but
yes.
has it kind of helped you like really consolidate everything and be able
Yes.
to?
This is
Awesome.
therapy with
Awesome.
myself, and
Yeah.
being able to share the truth in my story. Definitely. I know that other people need to hear it, but it's just so it's so therapeutic to get it out on paper and just be like, this is my truth. And now people aren't going to say you're a liar and you just have an eating disorder. And it's not revenge, not at all. I don't have any resentment, but it's nice that the truth always wins. It really does. And
I'm counting on that.
yeah. So
yeah, that's awesome. Now I will say, I just bring this up because for people who don't really understand how certain situations can affect you, like health wise. For instance, I was always one that I love to go out and especially go dancing and do these different, go out to eat, those kind of things. And we did that. But as soon as this whole lockdown and the mask wearing and all this craziness, it affected me greatly because I felt, I don't know, just it just felt off. And when we would go at, still now when we go out, and I'm in Texas, so everything is pretty much open for the most part, but there's still like a mask mandate. So you see all these people wearing these masks. You can't see them smile. You can't see who they are. I find that incredibly disturbing. It is not my new normal. I don't like it. And it makes me not want to leave my house because it feels off. And so there's something, and yes, we have, freedom to do most things. Okay. And that's what my husband always tells me. Well, at least we are free to do that. All you have to do is wear a mask. Okay. No, it's not normal. We are not meant to wear a mask. We are meant to be able to look at people and see them smile and see, it's just off, and it affects me. It has caused me stress. It has caused me to feel depressed, and it has affected my stress level, and in return, my cortisol. And so it has just not been a good situation. I've started to put on weight, and part of that's menopause too, but some of it is I know I have high stress. My cortisol is freaking off the charts. So situations like this can absolutely, affect your health. And everything that you've gone through, so much it affects your health. And you have to find some stress management, some way to be able to deal with your issues. And you writing a book is awesome. Sometimes, if people just write down their stuff in a journal, that helps. So whatever you need to do to be able to, get some relief, because it does affect your health. It absolutely does. So definitely, I'm very glad that you're doing that.
Yeah, thank you. It comes out in my posts too on Instagram. I mean, I write these things. You'd think I would plan them, but like they're just like, oh, okay, it's on my heart, like written in 30,
journal.
Just right away. Yeah, it's just a cry of my heart. And I am an open book. I don't have anything to hide. I'm not ashamed. I see myself through the way that Christ sees me. So like, yes, I have many imperfections, but this is really good news that a lot of people need to hear. And I'm excited. I'm so excited to help other people. And
I'm so excited for you. And I think it's amazing, your journey. And I think you're an incredibly awesome person. I really do. I have the utmost respect, and you inspire me, and thank you. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It means a lot. It really does.
My pleasure. If you want to do a round 2, let me know.
I would love it.
I really appreciate it.
You're on. Don't you heard her, y'all. And hey, while y'all are here, go ahead and subscribe to my channel and go follow Rebekah. I'll have all her information below. I think she's somebody that you would definitely benefit from. So definitely follow her. And Rebekah, again, it's been a pleasure. And you have the rest of your day be wonderful.
Likewise. Thank you.
Bye, Rebekah.
Bye.